So the base range, I would say, is like around 90K,
Mhm.
but depending on the job you get, there's bonuses, there's perks, and it could skyrocket exponentially, you know.
Yo designers, so today I have a UX UI designer. His name is Antonio, incredibly talented guy. And I'm just going to ask him all the questions that I imagine you guys want to know if you want to become a UX designer as well. So, Antonio, he's the man. So, I appreciate you coming on, Antonio.
Thank you for having me on, man. Really
Absolutely, man.
appreciate you.
Let's just jump right into it, Antonio. Let's go ahead and build that credibility. You have an incredible list of clients that you work for. Can you just kind of throw some names off and some of the work that you've done for them?
Yeah, man. Like right off of college or while I was still in school, I started freelancing for just a bunch of like smaller tech companies, and that kind of uh got me my start in like the tech world. So from there, I kind of jumped into Snapchat, Netflix, HBO, and then went on to what I'm doing currently now is UCLA, and just a few other like design studios,
Mhm.
things like that. So
Sweet.
yeah, man.
Yeah, I love hearing all these big names. You have to be good in order to try to get onto their radar. And so let's just talk about like what is UX and UI to you?
Well, UI UX is really a it's just a branch of design that focuses more on, so where I think in regular design you're it's kind of like a one-way street where you're trying to get some, information to the end user.
Mhm.
UI UX deals with the exact same kind of parameters, but it adds the component of the user being able to give information back.
Mhm.
And that's kind of where the user interface comes in, and the user experience. How easy is it for them to interface with whatever it is you have, and how easy is it for them to receive the information that you're giving out.
Mhm.
But yeah, that's I think it's all in the same wheelhouse as design. It just adds that extra layer.
Mhm.
So that's kind of what you have to be aware of when you're designing and you're going into the field of UI UX.
Mhm. So, can you explain maybe a little bit more clearly what is UI and then the difference between that with UX?
Oh yeah, yeah. So user interface is, there's people that have different definitions of things, and these kind of these labels get thrown around a lot, and they mean different things to different people. But I think the easiest way of understanding it is, the user interface is an actual interface that you would design. So it could be a website, it could be an app, it could be anything that you would interface with. And user experience ties into that, which is like how easy it is or hard it is for someone to interface with it. But the UX part can also be disengaged from UI, and it can be its own thing. User experience doesn't only apply to user interfaces, it applies to experiences that you'd have anywhere else. It could also be at a hotel, in a mall, the experience you'd have in your Tesla. So UI and UX are definitely not interchangeable. They have their own very specific things. But when you're talking about like something that most people will talk about, apps, websites, things like that, that's when you kind of bring them together.
Mhm. So, tell us a little bit about yourself, Antonio. What is your specific specialty? What do you do the best, maybe compared to anybody else?
Well, I would probably say that um, I got into design because I enjoy bringing a vision to life. So I love, just regular design and doing the grunt work and everything. But I think that my career path right now is taking me to something that's closer to art directing or creative directing. My I guess my specialty would be concepts, creating concepts, and delivering on those concepts. And because of that, it's allowed me to jump between, I guess, different fields within design. So I do a lot of motion graphics. some 3D work, title sequences, some interactive stuff. And all of that just segues right into UI UX also.
I love it when people kind of get down and dirty about why they like something, you know, like and maybe that kind of translates to maybe one of these viewers that are a student who's trying to figure out if UI UX are for them. Like, what is it
Yeah.
that you really like about it?
Yeah, man. I honestly think that for a lot of designers, and I've talked to a few of them, and I feel like a lot of people that are in design enjoy the idea of having a final project, of finishing a project. I actually came from an engineering background. I was studying engineering, and then I made a switch to design right before I entered university, because as fun as engineering was, I think ultimately people in this field are people that enjoy seeing a final product delivered, and I think design really facilitates that. It really gives you something tangible at the end, something that, whether you're doing typography, poster design, UI UX, wayfinding, industrial design, product design, whatever it is, there is an end goal to it. And taking something that's, just an idea in your head, prototyping it, sketching it out, testing it out, and then making it real, is really satisfying. And I think that is a big motivator for me. I feel like that's kind of what drives me, what makes me passionate about design. And I think for most people that are in design, that's one of the key things that really has motivated them, is the idea that you could design something and then bring that thing to life.
Yeah, we all know that UX UI, like now when you look up job listings, they're popping up everywhere. Everybody's talking out about it. Everybody needs UX UI, but if you really think about it, not a lot of people go to school for UX UI. They usually come from different backgrounds: design, graphics design, industrial design. Can you talk about your kind of journey from being a graphics designer during going to school and then becoming a UX UI designer?
Most people right now working in UI UX tend to come from a, a programming or an engineering background, because I'm just assuming that it's people that are building apps and websites that are kind of trying to get into the front end of things, and designing those things. My journey into it really just started last year. I've just been a visual designer since I graduated, doing all kinds of stuff, everything from like, product mock-ups, 3D motion graphics, 3D printing, prototyping things, interactive stuff. Um, and I think just last year I fell into it, really because uh, I started I started with a side project, kind of like as a hobby. And then, I started posting that on Instagram, and, talking to some friends. All of a sudden they said, hey, and, the funny thing about this is in design, most of your family members or friends really don't know what it is that you do. So once they see this one thing that you might have done, they're gonna be like, oh, yeah, he's an animator. He does some drawing stuff. So I think I showed a couple of friends some stuff that I was working on, and they're like, oh yeah, he's like a UI UX person. And I honestly think that like they manifested that into the universe, because last year I started picking up a lot of freelance work in the UI UX field. And I was a little skeptical about jumping into it because I knew nothing about it. Um, and then the more I worked in it, the more I realized it's literally just design. It is the exact same thing as laying out a book, doing a poster, creating some title sequence. It's literally all this. It's the same software, and it's the same kind of workflow. You have a problem, and you just work backwards from it, trying to solve it, using design.
Mhm.
So, if you're good with typography, if you're good with laying things out, you're good at UI UX. It's a branch of the exact same thing. And it really just comes down to adjusting your thinking just a little bit. You have a new set of parameters, you have a new set of rules you can't break. Instead of doing laying out a physical book, now you got to design something in 1920 by 1080 at 72 dpi
Mhm.
with but conceptually behind the scenes it's all the same thing. So I think that's been my journey. And I feel like that's the journey for a lot of people. If once you start working in a studio or something, you start talking to people, you're like, hey, what's your background? Everyone's like, oh, I'm an English major. I studied psychology. I didn't even graduate. I just took some IT course. It really is just people that are good at problem solving and just good with concepts.
Mhm.
And anybody can do that.
So tell us a little bit more about like let's just say you get a client, HBO or something, and they have a project for you. How does that usually kind of play out? You get introduction to the project, and how does that kind of look? What's the average kind of things that they would want you to do?
In a small studio, the workflows are slightly different when you're talking about a 1 to 2 person team versus like a 10-person team. But most of the projects start off with a kickoff meeting. A client will approach you. It's usually like a key team member that most of the time is managing a project that's already like kind of moving, and they're bringing you as an extra asset in their team. And it starts off with a brief of what's been done or what needs to be done. You're not at the tail end of a project, but you're somewhere in the beginning of a project. And they'll bring me on board and they'll say, these are the assets that we have. This is the concept behind whatever this product is, whether it's an app, a website, software, anything. Um, and they'll say, these are the parameters. This is kind of what we need. And you have a kickoff meeting. Most projects, and this is the only thing that's new to me. If you start working in these kinds of projects, is they'll have trackers. So they'll probably do like a Google sheet or something, and you'll see like all the work being delegated to different people. And now I'm talking like in the post-COVID era where everything's remote work. So there's a lot more like these Zoom meetings and Slack communication. So it's slightly different than how it was before. But it the hard part about this is you do have to get familiar with the lingo, with the way people kind of build their workflows around UI UX projects. It's not the hardest thing in the world, but that's the only thing you got to get accustomed to. And then a lot of these bigger companies, like if you're working for Netflix or Snapchat, they really, I like them because they understand that they have to lean on your creativeness. So they do give you a lot of freedom. They're hiring you because of your supposed talent. So this is really where the time to shine.
Mhm.
And there's a lot of experimentation, a lot of prototyping. And the work that I do specifically is usually R&D work. So it's creating motion animations, a lot of GIFs, a lot of testing of ideas. um Sometimes it does get a little tedious because you're trying to figure out, for example, point sizes for the font that's going in a button. And so you do a whole pitch deck about this is what it looks like at 8 points, here it is at 9, 11 points. It's a lot of testing and iterating
Mhm.
some design.
Mhm.
And so I feel like that's what's made it less scary for me, where especially in these bigger projects where people think, oh, there's this one guy who's going to design the next Facebook app, and the whole world and all the pressures on him. It's really not. It's very easy. It's a lot of just thinking about all the small details that go into whatever it is you're making, button sizes, colors, things like that. And it's super collaborative. It's a back and forth between you and other team members. And it's once you get your first job, first project, first anything really, whether it's paid or not, you realize that it's a huge learning experience. It's a huge learning experience. It's not as scary as people think. It's just very collaborative. And these kinds of projects usually last, I would say, anywhere between, if it's R&D work, those are usually like about anywhere between 2 weeks to about a month and a half.
Mhm.
And then if you're on a team that's actually developing like an actual, product, those could run possibly anywhere between 6 months to about a year and a half.
So I think anybody at this point who's still listening, I think what they're thinking is, man, how did this guy get Netflix and HBO and all of these major firms to recognize him? Like, how are you finding all of these clients? Are you, like you have a premium account on LinkedIn, or, you have really good connections? What's going on here, Antonio?
Oh man, I have no idea. I have no idea how I've gotten these clients. I feel like I've only ever applied to a job once in my life. That was my very first job. It was at Access TV. Shout out to Access TV. I was a junior motion graphics designer. It was a kind of like a summer internship role, and I really just went in for the softest interview, man. It was just like, hey, you want the job? I'm like, yeah, I'll take it. And that is the totality of my experience in job hunting and getting jobs. After that, it's honestly just been word of mouth. And, I've never really, there's a lot of people that are like, oh, you got to build your network. You gotta go to all these, events, things like that. Man, I've never really thought about building my network. It really is just, I feel like this field is so collaborative. You just naturally fall into it. Um, if you're salaried, you have this kind of you have this thing in the back of your head where you're like, okay, I have some stability, but if you're freelance, there's something that just happens naturally to you in the back of your head where you're kind of like not always trying to network, but you're always trying to collaborate on projects because you're like, I have a lot of free time to fill. And you just naturally fall into the culture of whatever it is you're trying to get into.
Mhm.
And so for me, that was a start. After that, my boss at the time, Bobby, shout out to Bobby, great motion graphic designer. He got me my other job over at Triumph Studios. And then from there, I got linked up into some other design studios. And the crazy thing is in the real world, like there's no real set guidelines, like if you say you graduated in design, a lot of people don't really know what that means, and a lot of companies and managers and headhunters will reach out to you and be like, hey, are you interested in this that kind of resembles design?
Mhm.
So I jumped into visual effects. I jumped into 3D. I did some visual effects, some 3D work. I jumped into editing, so I started editing some commercials just kind of because I knew the software already. So, once you learn the Adobe suite, you can move around anywhere.
Mhm.
And I think because I was so indecisive of where I wanted to land at, um, I just naturally built a big network. And, friends of friends of friends will, kind of bring you on board at different projects. Um, the other thing is that I do want to mention before I forget is everyone that I met at Cal State Long Beach, including you, Jimmy. That's like, dude, honestly, it's insane. Like everyone is doing so well that graduated from our class. You have lots of friends that are now working at Apple, Netflix. Who else? There's people working at Facebook. Everyone's just doing so well, and all the friends and people that you meet in school also bring you up. You think it's not going to happen, but trust me, you give it 1 or 2 years, everyone grows up a little, people settle down, they start to get jobs, and I mean, just the work doesn't end.
Mhm. Awesome.
They bring you up. So that's been my experience. It's a lot of people I know are always on Indeed, job hunting, but I think for me, it's just been something that I'm just passionate about. So I've never stressed too much about it. I kind of just, if I have some free time, I pick up a side project or, do something for myself. You share it on Instagram. And that's another way of getting jobs is a lot of my friends have gotten jobs through Instagram.
Mhm.
If you just post work on there, whatever it is you're doing, people notice you, someone picks you up. So yeah, I mean, that's my advice is really just follow your passion, just keep working, doing what you're doing, and you get noticed. You absolutely get noticed. When you're in school, you're scared that you're not going to get noticed. You're scared that you're like, oh my God, I am never getting a job. But man, oh man, once you start getting that first job and second job, you wish you had vacation time, man. You start wishing you had some more vacation time.
Yeah, I love
So
that.
yeah, man.
It's crazy because when I always ask people this question, they're, like they always, for some reason, just say it's word of mouth. And it's hard to really kind of like set that into practice. Anybody that's trying to find clients, they're like, God damn, like no one's word of mouthing me, so,
Yeah.
but I think there's some magic behind it where if you just kind of absorb yourself in the work and you love doing it, it kind of just like naturally like spreads and people just hear about it and know about you without you really even trying to directly. Let's kind of talk about a little bit of the tough parts about you being a UX UI designer. Like, is there stuff that hits a certain part of the process where you're like, man, I don't like this, or maybe certain feedback that you tend to get on occasion? Like what are some of the like stuff that aren't so exciting and happy?
There's a stage where people go through everyone goes through imposter syndrome the first few years right out of college. That's a stage that's not that great, but you learn to get over it. I think also something that people really something that's useful for businesses, but it's not that great for designers is standardization of things, is creating a template for everything. You know, that's a pitfall that's hard to avoid, but with every studio doesn't want to constantly be at the bleeding edge of things. They don't, they want some stability. So as fun as like the first couple stages of design are, at some point you got to just turn everything to a formula, you know and it makes everything kind of monotonous. um you know People get burnt that way. They feel like it's kind of boring. But that's why I think it's good to you know not just jump ship, if you start to get bored, but to always have like side projects to kind of keep you engaged and keep everything fun.
Before you actually ever landed these big time jobs and getting recognized by them, I mean, you probably had to go through the interview process and show your portfolio. Can you talk about like how important the portfolio is, the quality of portfolio, maybe how many projects you have in it, and even what to show in your portfolio?
Yeah, I haven't even updated my portfolio in a good minute, but it still works. You don't The portfolio is a key ingredient in definitely getting hired. And it's not to make it some kind of scary thing, but if you think about it from the perspective of someone that's trying to hire someone, it's like you just got to see what it is you do. Um, and I've been in a position where I've had to hire some people, and I could tell you from my point of view, um, I'm just a normal human being. I don't want to be bored. I don't want to look through a wall of text. You know, just put yourself in their shoes. I think having a solid portfolio that's diverse, um, simple, straight to the point. My portfolio has maybe 6 projects in it. But I dissected them. I show a couple gifs of like the thought process behind things. If you're trying to get into anything that's motion related, 3D, 2D motion, animation, editing, definitely have a reel. Keep it short and sweet, 60 seconds. You don't want to bore people. They just want to make sure you're able to do what it is they're going to ask you to do.
And I love that you said that. In the portfolio, people are kind of like overemphasize it and they overthink it, but at the end of the day, it's really just like showing the client, showing the employer this is what I do, this is what I can do for you,
Yeah.
and that's all it really is.
And that's all it is,
Yeah, yeah. When you are talking to new clients, potential clients, like putting all these skills aside and portfolio aside, like why do you think they put trust in you? Like is it how you come off? Like what do you think you are doing that they're like, okay, I'm gonna pick Antonio?
You pick up bigger and bigger clients, and you get paid more and more money the further you move along in your career, not just because you gain more experience, but because you're more comfortable in the projects, and that kind of makes the clients comfortable knowing that you're comfortable. So if your first couple of years, you're an intern, you're going to be real nervous, and things like that. I think once you gain some experience and you just become comfortable with yourself and the projects, um, it makes clients comfortable.
Mm-hmm.
And that's really what I think they want. Like businesses want, stability. They don't want to rock the boat.
Mm-hmm.
So the more comfortable you are, the more you can push back in things. I think like a lot of people like that. It might seem a little counterintuitive to someone that's fresh, but like I start to push back on a lot of things with clients because now you have your little side projects, you have your main income. So now you're not so worried. So if a client comes to me and they're like, hey, I want to do this and this, I'd be like, if it's something that's really like out of pocket and just really dumb, I'm like, dude, that's not gonna work. Like, when you're
Gotta tell
hungry,
them
you're like,
straight
oh, I'll
up.
take whatever. Yes, I'll do it. But if you can start to push back and then, explain yourself why, you know,
Yeah.
the clients will respect you. They'll be like, oh, shoot, okay, like, you kind of know what it is you're talking about.
Mm.
And that goes a long way. I feel like when people talk about word of mouth, that's the word of mouth that I'm talking about. It's a client, will say, dude, like, oh my God, this person, I came to them with this idea, but they didn't like it. This designer, I was trying to hire them, he didn't like this idea, but he gave me an even better idea. Like, dude, he's really good. So once you start to get into that rhythm, that's, I think, what ultimately what clients want
Mm.
is they want to work with someone smarter than them. And
Mhm.
when you show that confidence, when you show that ability to not be shy and really push back and really push for good design and good ideas, that's really appreciated.
Mhm.
um and you learn that, especially for myself. I don't want to work with people that are, you never want to work with people that are like less advanced than you. I like working with people more advanced than me, who are smarter than me, who I can learn from. So if you can show me that, I really want to work with you. And I think that's true for everyone. So when you show that, that ability to think critically and not be scared of pushing towards something better, clients respect that. And I think that's a key motivator in them hiring you.
Absolutely. Yeah. Reliability can't be emphasized enough, right?
Oh yeah, yeah.
Um,
That's
uh,
number one. Everything that we're talking about in this video, it's all, second place and below. Number one for a business is reliability,
mm,
stability. If
mm,
you can consistently deliver something, even if it's terrible work, if you can count on them to do that one thing, then people kind of put you on the radar somewhere. They'll be like, okay, maybe this person's work isn't as good, but they're reliable enough to do this. I'm still going to hire them. you
mm.
know Reliability is the key motivator in everything for a business. So learn to be reliable, and with experience comes reliability. When you're fresh out of university, you're not reliable because you don't know what you're doing. You're still like in college mode. You're like, oh man, I'd rather be out at the bar drinking with the boys. I'd rather be doing this. I'd rather be having fun. But 1 or 2 years in, you start to really like it. You go, okay, now I see the benefit in being reliable.
Mhm.
And that's where your salary starts to increase. That's when the clients start to really roll in.
And this is probably a question that I imagine like everybody probably wanted me to ask right at the beginning, which is Like Antonio, what programs do you use most often? And you kind of said it a little bit, but maybe you can touch on maybe some other ones and maybe even describe a little bit in detail of.
My suggestion would be to learn the Adobe Suite first. I know how to use all the programs in there. It's easy if you're subscribed to the what is it, the Master Suite or whatever, you get all of them. I just opened them up, dude. Whenever I have some free time, I opened up, Dreamweaver, I opened up InDesign, and I just kind of did a thing in it. It's all the same. They all function the same. So, start off with Photoshop and Illustrator and InDesign, and then, slowly work your way down. Just at least open them up and see what it's about. So I use that. Putting everything together is in Cinema 4D. Organic modeling and things like that is ZBrush. Hard surface modeling is Moi and Fusion 360. And then you kind of just, figure out whatever pipeline works best for you, and you bring them all together.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, you threw a ton of programs out there, but I think the core ones, like you mentioned at first, were Photoshop, Illustrator, InDesign. Those ones are probably the ones that are used most for UX, UI.
Specifically, if you're going into UI UX, you want to learn Photoshop, Illustrator, and Figma. Figma seems to be the king of the hill. Like, gets switched out every year. Right now, it seems to be that Figma is gaining some steam. So I would definitely push forward with that and really pick that up.
For sure, man. Yeah, and I think in the design industry, it's always good to learn how to get good at learning programs because eventually programs are going to fade away and the new generation is going to be using a different program, and then you're going to be the old guy around the block, using the old program, right?
Back in my days, I was using SolidWorks,
I know.
not this crap on your iPad.
I'm still using CS2 Photoshop.
Yeah.
Running all these programs, what kind of computers are you using? Are you using Mac? Are you using Windows? And tell us a little bit about the specs that you have going on.
I don't have the luxury of being picky and being a fanboy of one thing or whatever. I use everything. I use custom built PCs. I had to learn how to build my own PCs and how to fix them. So my big workhorse is a 10 core i9. That's water cooled, and it's got two GPUs in there. I have two 1080 Ti's in that thing. I was on the verge of buying a 3090 GPU right before pandemic hit, and then 2020 hit. I don't know what happened. I kind of lagged it. I was building another PC at the time. I waited too long, and GPU prices skyrocketed to an insane amount. So my computers are mostly new. I have a smaller mini ATX one that's got a new Ryzen 7 CPU in it. Mm-hmm. Most of my stuff is water cooled, or I use those big old Noctua fans. But sadly, my GPUs are, I got the 3080, 3060 Ti, two 1080 Ti's. Not the latest and greatest on the GPUs because of the prices. But I have a workaround. You once you start to get to a level where you have to deliver bigger and bigger projects, it does not matter how fast your GPUs are. At some point, it's not going to be fast enough. So I recommend everyone get comfortable with render farms. My go-to render farm is Rebus. So currently, I do a lot of work on my MacBook Pro that I just got. It's the M1 Pro chip. Mm-hmm. It's a 16 gig. I do some rough modeling in it. I set up a scene or whatever, and I just shoot it off to a render farm, and just, the client's paying for it anyways. Mm-hmm. So GPUs are not, they're not going to make or break something. So I know a lot of people right now are asking, like, what GPU should I get? Get whatever you can afford. Everything's super expensive right now. I honestly think something like around like a 3060 Ti works for most designers. It lets you dabble in a little bit of 3D. And if you got anything bigger than that, use a render farm.
Absolutely,
And
yeah. And the benefits of a render farm is like you could shoot it off to them and continue to still use your machine, right? Because
yeah, yeah,
if you're rendering
yeah,
locally, it's like yeah, okay, I can't use this thing right now,
yeah, exactly.
And I just got a last couple questions for you. I
Yeah.
usually like to keep this towards the end because I know this is what everybody always wants to know. Okay, right out of college, getting into UX UI, how much does a person like right out of college you would expect to get paid?
It's a little difficult to gauge right now because of the situation we're in right now, because of the pandemic and everything going on. Inflation has really changed things. I honestly think for most people right out of college, if you can get something and you got no experience or anything, but you're trying to get in somewhere, ask for something around the 60 to 70K range. And as your first gig, as your first job, that's more than enough money. Once you gain that experience, you become exponentially more valuable. You currently don't know how to work in teams, you don't know the workflows. Once you gain that experience, I think most jobs jump into like the 90 to 100K range. It'll take a few years to get there, but almost everyone I know at is probably not going to take less than like 90 to 100K. And if you're seasoned and you're starting to get into like that art director area where you're no longer senior designer, you're kind of like, and you get there real quick. I mean, like 4 years, 4 or 5 years, and you're up there already. That's, I feel like it's now getting into the 120, between 120 and 180 range. And that I'm talking about like the minimum salary with, like I'm not talking about the benefits or stock or anything. It's kind of like that's the range. However, there's exceptions to all that, and there's exceptional people that land themselves crazy roles in weird situations. So there are a lot of creative directors and art directors that are in the 200 to 300K range. And that's not really like, that's not salaried. I don't know what their salary would be, maybe like 150 or whatever. But it's just the nature of some businesses. They work off of certain budgets, and some studios will have clients say, this project here is like 500K, and if you're the lead designer, you get to take some of that, little
Mhm.
bonuses. So the base range, I would say, is like around 90K,
Mhm.
but depending on the job you get, there's bonuses, there's perks, and it could skyrocket exponentially. If you're
Mhm.
freelancing on on the side, um you can double that salary really really easily.
Absolutely. And you're a freelancer, so how do you usually go about charging your clients? Do you charge per hour? Do you charge per day? Do you charge per project?
I used to screw myself over, and I would do like hourly, and I'd give people discounts and things like that. Once you get a little bit of experience and you're comfortable with the work you're doing, I say either flat rate or day rate. And because when you're starting off, you don't know what the budget is, you don't know how much. Trust me, they would not be paying you this much money if they weren't making millions. So you can ask for whatever you want, and you can definitely absolutely they could absolutely afford day rates and flat rates.
Hmm.
I like day rates. I think it's a good compromise. And I'll do like a 10-hour guarantee on a day rate, but it it adds you got to respect yourself. It's like if you're working with a client, you're like, hey, my day rate is this, And if you want to use me for whatever you want that day, if you just want me to shoot off one email, a day rate. If I'm working all 10 hours, day rate, 4 hours, day rate. Because you got to take into consideration everything else, your overhead, your rent, electricity, and your time. If I'm doing this thing for you, I could have been somewhere else doing something else. So if you want me to block out just something for you that day, it's a day rate. And I think that's a great compromise. It's fair to both sides. Figure out your overhead, you know, and just be honest with yourself. Just don't try and don't try and sell yourself short. Figure out what your rent is, what everything is, gas, food, staying alive, just the base, whatever it is, break it down into how much you would need a day, and that's how much you charge.
Yeah. And if you're a freelancer too, you got to consider health insurance too, right?
Health insurance, man, everything, and it adds up.
If you're the designer of a designer, you're in the lab and you're trying to piece together characteristics and skills, what could you piece together to make the ultimate UX UI designer?
Number one key trait would be have a passion for something outside of design, whether it's you have a passion for reading books, movies, games. Something has to inform your design. For me, I'm a big film buff, so I love uh old movies, new movies. For me, people like Ridley Scott, movies like Blade Runner. And this is like for a lot of designers, those kinds of aesthetics and movies and stories really informed me. And I feel like that's been a key trait in my personality and how I design. So number one is have the ability to be passionate about things outside of design, really get into them, really lean into them. That's gonna be your driving force. Um, and the other skill would be really good at learning. Learn how to learn. All of the big designers that I follow, that I respect, people like G Monk or Ash Thorpe, you look at their stories, and it's just, people that really liked to learn stuff. They saw a new piece of software, they saw something that inspired them, and they're like, I'm just gonna take a stab at it. Um, that's it, and have a steady hand. If you're somewhat good at sketching and drawing ideas on paper, getting something out of your head on paper, you're golden, man. You're golden. That's it. That's the ultimate designer right there.
Antonio, awesome, man. You dropped some bombs on this
Dude, I
interview.
appreciate you having me
Yeah,
on here,
Ant-
man.
like
Really
so
appreciate it.
you want to throw out some things that people can catch you on, and I'll link it all down at the bottom, your Instagram, stuff like that.
Yeah, man, you can catch me at a rod the god. And my website is antoniorodriguez.co.co. I'm not, the busiest guy on social media, but you could always shoot me a DM there, and then, can always chat. And then also, I'm a LA native, so most design shows or things that take place in LA, I'm usually at. So anywhere from like, sometimes Adobe has that Creative Jam or Motion Plus. I'm usually at those events, so people can catch me there too.
For sure, man. All right, I'll link all the links, Antonio's accounts down in the description below. All right, Antonio, I really
Awesome, man.
appreciate it, man. Maybe I'll have you on again if there's a ton more questions on this. So you guys leave your comments down below for anything. Antonio will probably be reading the comments too. So shout out to Antonio, and just ask any questions, and really appreciate having you on, Antonio. And I'll catch you. Have a good night.
Thank you, man. Appreciate it.